everyone, I'm Carol Ann Riddell, and welcome to Arts in the City. New York is home to famous jazz clubs like Birdland and the Village Vanguard, and it is also home to acclaimed musician Ron Carter, the world's most recognized jazz bassist, who is also a distinguished professor emeritus at CUNY's City College. Our Eddie Bailey sat down with this musical legend at his Upper West Side home.
When I got to New York, August of 1959, I went down to the heartbeat of the city. At that time it was 52nd Street, Broadway. And there was a Birdland. Uptown, there was a place on 132nd called Wells. Jazz all over New York, especially uptown. It's a great time to be here.
New York City, known for a lot of things, including its thriving jazz scene. In the 1960s, bebop jazz was all the craze. Jazz from downtown to uptown. Cats dressed to the nines in smoke-filled clubs, playing what jazz pianist Billy Taylor calls America's classical music. What rose out of this scene were a lot of legends, some of them still living. Introducing three-time Grammy Award-winning bassist, Ron Carter.
I've been a student all my life on how the bass operates, and I get better at understanding it as I've gotten older.
What made Ron unique was his ability to bring the bass to the forefront in a genre dominated by horned instruments.
I understand the power of the instrument. I understand how my note choices influence this environment that I'm in right now. I think the other thing is that I hear sounds in my ears, and these guys I'm playing with are the kind of guys who want to be as curious as I am as to what this note means, the tempo of this tune, just the right key, that kind of detail. And once the bass player makes that kind of commitment to the music, and the band grows like this because now there's an important factor coming from this guy who's no longer behind the palm tree.
That same unyielding commitment to the music led him to one of the biggest highlights of his career. In 1963, he was requested personally by Miles Davis to play bass in his second great quintet.
One of the things I'm always asked is, what was it like playing with that Miles Davis band? I don't treat that as an experience. It's always I'm going to school free. I'm going to school with Miles, I'm going to school with Herbie, I'm going to school with Tony, I'm going to school with Wayne. And I get a chance to play with these teachers every night, and they are freely sharing information with me.
His bass lines appear in over 2,200 recordings, making him the most recorded bassist in jazz history, with his bass contributing to songs like Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly, Freddie Hubbard's Red Clay, and A Tribe Called Quest's Excursions and Buggin' Out. Ron says that without the bass, you don't know what the harmony is.
I've seen groups and I've heard them play, and I've enjoyed their efforts, and the first thing to get canceled is the bass player. I think those groups, while interesting for the first 3 minutes, kind of lose their impetus for the next 5 minutes because there's not a harmonic direction that's as audible and as present as the bass player can provide for those size ensembles.
And his bass has been the harmonic direction that has spanned over 6 decades for the likes of Gil Scott-Heron, Billy Joel, Paul Desmond, Quincy Jones, Paul Simon, Chick Corea, Aretha Franklin, Bette Midler, and countless others. Back in May, Ron was feted at Carnegie Hall in a one-night-only celebration for his 85th birthday as he performed select material from his catalog. I just had to ask him, at 85, what keeps him driven?
I'm determined that there's a set of notes that I haven't found yet. I've had this curiosity of what makes music from the bottom up more effective based on my note choices. And I can't find that out in my house.
Ron is still on the move, constantly touring and performing. Be on the lookout for his upcoming PBS documentary, Ron Carter, Finding the Right Notes, airing this fall. He'll also be performing at Birdland in New York City the entire month of October, continuing his legacy, plucking and strumming away for that set of missing notes. This is Eddie Bailey for Arts in the City.
Once October hits, I pretty much think about candy all month. So if you're anything like me and those Halloween chocolate minis just aren't enough, we've got a suggestion for you. Tina Beth Pina takes us to Chocobar Cortés in the Bronx, where the food is steeped in chocolate and culture.
Chocolate is an ingredient just like salt or pepper, and so it is an art form to use it in new and creative ways.
Chocobar Cortés is the only restaurant in New York City where every item on the menu includes chocolate, from the grilled cheese to the hamburger with chocolate ketchup.
That combination of sweet and savory and making chocolate like an actual meal, that's kind of what inspired then the rest of the menu, kind of including chocolate as an ingredient in everything.
So we had to ask the head chef how she makes that combination work.
How is it that you add chocolate to everything on the menu? How is that even possible?
It's not that hard because we use it like a condiment. You don't have to think about it like it's sweet. It's sweet. For the example, the mole sauce, I use it as the cocoa powder. They have no salt on it, so it's just the adding like the texture of the chocolate, like the flavor of the chocolate. In the pique, we added like 70% chocolate, and you taste the chocolate, but you taste the pique too.
The restaurant is the first franchise location outside of Puerto Rico.
And why open Chocobar Cortés here in the Bronx?
For us, as a Puerto Rican and a Dominican heritage brand, it was important for us to go where the people who have been supporting us are. I've had a lot of people say thank you so much for opening this here in the Bronx. We needed spaces like this. We needed more spaces for our people.
When you visit Chocobar Cortés, you'll not only savor the chocolate menu and maybe buy a chocolate bar or two, but also indulge in the company's other mission, their arts foundation, Fundación Cortés.
Our mission is to educate and inspire with our passion for the arts of the Caribbean. We've impacted over 14,000 kids through our programming in Puerto Rico. Still, a lot of people don't know about the work that we do. The fact that when you buy these chocolate bars, when you buy our products, you're also supporting humanities education in Puerto Rico.
4 special edition hot chocolate bars, in collaboration with Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez, the creator of La Borinqueña, are currently being sold at the restaurant and online to raise money for the foundation's Activate Your Powers with the Arts program. Plus, to further support this initiative, there's also an artist wall exhibit displaying Edgardo's and Chocobar's current artistic collaboration.
It was just a creative way for us to tell our story, as well as create awareness for the work that we're doing in our foundation in Puerto Rico, and also to celebrate La Borinqueña, who is the world's first Afro-Puerto Rican female superhero. The plan is to have other works either from local artists or from part of our collection in Puerto Rico.
The art connection doesn't end with the wall display. In fact, there's even more art to admire. From the family's pictures that adorn the restaurant to the chandelier at the entrance of Chocobar, a piece commissioned from Puerto Rican artist Jorge Gonzalez. The nearly 100-year-old chocolate company that runs the restaurant even features lighting fixtures made from old chocolate molds, as well as bathrooms plastered with floor-to-ceiling vintage Chocobar Cortés ads. Clearly, the restaurant's arts roots run deep.
So historically, we've always had a connection to the arts. My great-grandfather, who founded the company, was an artist himself. He drew the original logo that we still use today. My grandfather wasn't an artist, but he worked directly with a lot of artists, whether it was through, creating the jingles that are kind of like iconic little marketing jingles. Eso es, Chocolate Cortés. But he also included storybooks that came in the chocolate bars in the 1950s and 60s that a lot of people in Puerto Rico, especially in remote areas, in the mountain towns, they learned how to read using these little storybooks that came in the chocolate bars because they didn't have that much access to reading materials.
What do you think your grandparents would say, seeing this restaurant here in the Bronx?
I hope that they would be proud, but I think that having them kind of like be a part of the soul and the essence of this place is inspiring to me. I have this legacy that I need to continue and evolve and move forward. And so for me, it's just a constant inspiration and reminder to keep doing what I'm doing.
For Arts in the City, I'm Tina Beth Pina.
From chocolate and art to another creative combination, Andrew Falzone has more from the Mishkin Gallery at CUNY's Baruch College, where a new exhibition dives into marine science.
Who Will Speak for the Oceans is a new exhibition with what might be an unlikely origin story, the marriage of art and science. Dr. David Gruber and Alaina Claire Feldman are what you might call unlikely collaborators. Dr. Gruber is a marine biologist at CUNY's Baruch College, and Feldman is director of Baruch's Mishkin Gallery. Together, they're co-curators of the Mishkin exhibition, Who Will Speak for the Oceans, a cross-disciplinary collaboration of art and science.
I think artists and science are so similar in the way in which we're approaching things. Very inquisitive, have a certain childlike curiosity to the world.
I think that we both found something interesting in each other's work, and we both found something that piqued our curiosity, and we wanted to really see how they would come together.
The exhibition finds its roots in the work of Dr. Roger Payne. He's one half of the science research team that discovered that whales sing, which we now know is long-range communication. In 1970, some of the recordings were released as an album called Songs of the Humpback Whale. The album went multi-platinum and is the most popular nature recording ever released, but it was far more than a commercial success.
In 1982, the album was actually played on the floor of Congress in hearings about ending commercial whaling in the United States. And in part of this album, it changed the law. Commercial whaling did indeed end.
And the exhibit shows that we connect with whales not only through song, but through grief. The video projection Telequa by Bahamian artist Dominique Knowles depicts a killer whale carrying its dead calf through the water. Also on display are the works of Else Bostelman, who composed these images for National Geographic. Working in the 1930s and a time before color photography, she illustrated based on descriptions from scientists and bones in museum collections. Taking a less literal approach is the work of Joan Jonas.
She created these 3 drawings, which, in her kind of typical calligraphy style of fish, but then one of the paintings is actually a female body, presumably hers, that's actually becoming animal. And so she maps an octopus kind of onto her body, and it depicts for me like a perfect analogy of us trying to get closer to the animal, and what happens when we sense them so much that we start to almost become them.
Perhaps the art best suited to pick up where whale song left off is the brainchild of Gruber himself, who is the lead on Project SETI, which teams an international consortium of experts from around the world with artificial intelligence to try to decipher the communications of the sperm whale. The project is ongoing and has the potential to become the Rosetta Stone for non-human communication. Among Gruber's project advisors is the man who started the movement.
Roger Payne is a core member of this and serves as a principal advisor on the whale biology team. And having Roger Payne as such a close confidant has been transformative. In one sense, bringing his lens of what Songs of the Humpback Whale did and how much impact that had in the 60s and 70s, but revisiting that from the 2020s. Can some of the lessons, some of the ways in which that had impact, can that translate to today?
And while Project SETI begins its research in Dominica, back in Midtown Manhattan, we can connect to the oceans through our own art. If you'd like to see Who Speaks for the Oceans at Baruch's Mishkin Gallery, it will be here until December 9th. I'm Andrew Falzone for Arts in the City.
Next up, one of New York's hidden gems, literally hidden. Susan Jun discovered a unique museum in an unusual location, an elevator shaft.
Nestled in an alleyway in Lower Manhattan is a place of ordinary objects that hold a profoundly powerful meaning. The tiny space located inside an elevator shaft is Mmuseumm, New York City's smallest museum.
It's kind of a cabinet of curiosities with its own unique spin. So unique that one of the co-founders doesn't want to appear on camera because he says the objects here speak for themselves.
Well, the idea of Mmuseumm is that it's object journalism. It's a way of looking at the world we're living in, thinking about who we are, thinking about social issues and current events through everyday objects.
Objects that have the ability to serve as a bridge to much more complex ideas.
There's something about the mundane and the kind of microcosm of our day-to-day that is in fact very revealing if we stop to look at it. A way of looking at the smallest elements, the details of our culture, to see the greatest truths of who we are.
Mmuseumm's annual exhibition is made up of several smaller ones. The collection is curated with a network of contributors from around the world with a decidedly editorial focus.
We're thinking about what is going on in the world, what are we dealing with, who is experiencing those stories firsthand.
The 2022 season focuses on power and the lack thereof.
These are receipts from the purchase of death row inmates' last meals. So it's looking at an incredibly brutal and harsh reality through these seemingly mundane, ordinary objects, but seeing them through this context kind of gives you a more moving and humanistic sense of these realities. These are personal possessions of mass migration, objects that were left behind in the Sonora Desert as people were trying to make their way from Mexico into the US seeking a better life. So again, when we kind of think about these as statistics or narratives removed from our everyday, presenting these very humble objects is a way of humanizing these stories.
Other exhibits hit closer to home, like this one which displays objects carried by people of color in the United States when they were shot and killed. From disturbing to inspiring, there's a mix of subject matter in the miniature exhibition that has maximum impact.
Everything that's in here needs to speak to something larger, something universal, something humanistic about the world that we're living in now.
Do you consider this art?
It's a good question. I consider anything that is done as well as it can be art.
By that definition, this art has traveled to museums around the world. Mmuseumm has a second location just 3 doors down, currently closed for renovation. Mmuseumm 1 is open Fridays and Saturdays 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 24/7 through viewing windows and a free audio guide or by private tour. For more information, visit mmuseumm.com. For Arts in the City, I'm Susan Jun.
We've got another fun example of art with a twist. It's on your wall, but you don't need a frame. We tried out removable wallpaper for an instant refresh. Jacqueline Schmidt always dreamed of being an artist ever since her dollhouse making days.
I used to make dollhouses when I was a little girl, and then build out the textures and the textiles and the furniture. And my grandmother was a seamstress, so she would build all the little outfits and patterns, and I would just build and build and build.
Now her work can be found on people's walls. In fact, all over them. She is one of multiple artists collaborating with a company called Chasing Paper, which makes removable wallpaper and other products. And we're not talking about your grandma's sticky shelf liner. Elizabeth Reese founded the company with her brother, an outgrowth of the family printing business in the Midwest. But her idea for removable wallpaper was born in New York City.
Initially, I started from a very personal place, which was I could not paint my West Village apartment. And so I wanted to personalize it without, having my landlord sue me. So that's how it started.
Chasing Paper and the removable wallpaper sector more generally have grown recently, particularly as people dove into home improvement projects during the pandemic. As Jacqueline sees it, it's not just looking at art, it's living with art.
I love the all-encompassing feeling, very different than a singular art piece. I feel like it transforms a space 100%.
Removable wallpaper is a popular solution for decorating on a budget, when you want to change but not a permanent one, or in a space that will transition over time, for example, a child's room. But back to logistics and the burning question.
How removable is removable?
Very removable. People always ask me this question. It's like a super sticky Post-it note. So all you're going to do is you're going to peel the paper from the backing.
I tried out a small-scale transformation myself, redoing a serving tray that went from plain to pretty in a matter of minutes.
You could change it out with the season or with the occasion.
Yeah.
Again, just something so quick, so easy that took us less than 5 minutes. Just a fun thing to dress things up.
If you're crazy for classic comedy or just crazy for Barry Mitchell like me, we've got a special treat for you. Honk if you love the Marx Brothers.
Well, the kids must know what their daddy says. Alex, do you know what your daddy said?
Arthur Harpo Marx, born New York City in 1888. On stage and screen, the nonverbal, horn-honking member of the legendary comedy team, the Four Marx Brothers. Still part of the comedy conversation today.
He spoke, and he spoke a lot. For many people who knew them, he was the most beloved Marx brother. For a guy who was known on screen for being completely insane, Harpo was the sanest man in Hollywood.
And speaking of Harpo,
I'm Robert Bader. I'm proud of the recently published book, Speaking of Harpo, which I co-authored with Harpo's wife, Susan Fleming Marx.
In a series of recorded interviews that began in the mid-1990s.
You couldn't help loving Harpo. Harpo had a unique personality. He was real. He wasn't reading from the script.
Maybe you first discovered Harpo Marx in a 1955 episode of I Love Lucy, the mirror routine.
Which I didn't know at the time was a recreation of something from their film Duck Soup.
Right, with Groucho as Groucho and Harpo as Groucho.
I get confused even thinking about it. I Love Lucy ran in syndication forever, it still does. So many people first saw a Marx brother by watching I Love Lucy reruns, and I was one of them. The Four Marx Brothers were the most successful act in vaudeville. They went to Broadway, they went to Hollywood and became movie stars, and they became the most iconic comedy team of the golden age of Hollywood. And to this day, they are still revered. They're one of the most well-remembered comedy teams in the history of show business.
Robert, among today's comedians, who do you think is most influenced by Harpo?
There is no performer who can do all the things Harpo does. There may be the occasional silent comedian. You can take a look at something like Penn and Teller never speaks. You've got Mr. Bean, can be in many of those situations. It would be like Harpo. Rowan Atkinson is a very good comedian, but he doesn't play the harp. But his influence is really profound in animated cartoons. Because the surreal aspect of Harpo is perfect for animation. He's incredibly physical, he's running all over the place, he's making noise, similarly with the Roadrunner and Coyote. Guy comes up to Harpo and says, "Hey buddy, can you help me out? I'd like to have a cup of coffee." And Harpo pulls a steaming hot cup of coffee out of his coat. That's the thing you see in a cartoon.
Susan made a number of Hollywood films in the early 1930s. Yes, that's her with W.C. Fields. But acting, she could take it or leave it. So when Harpo proposed, she gladly quit to start a family.
I loved making family because I hadn't had one.
She grew up an only child with parents that traveled around a lot. She was unable to have children, so they adopted. And they adopted 4 kids, and she was just the happiest mother in town. She didn't need to work in movies, she just wanted to be a mom.
Robert and Susan never finished writing her memoir, and Susan died in 2002. But recently, Robert revisited the manuscript.
During the pandemic, as something I might be able to do to keep myself out of trouble while I was locked in my house.
And with the blessing of Susan and Harpo's oldest son, Bill Marx, Robert finished the book.
I think any Marx Brothers fan should read it, and it's also an interesting book for widows. She was much younger than Harpo, and when Harpo died, she never wanted to remarry. And it's really a love story that continues up until the day she dies.
Speaking of Harpo by Susan Fleming Marx with Robert S. Bader. And now available in paperback, 4 of the 3 Musketeers, Robert's comprehensive look at the Marx Brothers' pre-Hollywood vaudeville and stage career. And thank you Tavern 29, East 29th Street off Park Avenue, for hosting us today. Barry Mitchell, Arts in the City. Hi, I'm Barry Mitchell. Carol Ann will be here in a minute. Carol Ann?
No.
You said you'd do this.
Fine. That is our show for today.
Oh,
Thanks so much.
No. As Harpo with the horn.
Happy?
Very nice.